Good morning. This is Mark Bruno, Editor-in-Chief of the Cannata Report. It is Friday, which means, of course, that we are here with Frank. But before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please like, share, subscribe. If you have a topic that you'd like us to consider for future episode, please just shoot us a comment in the comments, and we'll definitely consider it. So, Frank, I understand we have a special guest with us this morning from the BTA, Business Technology Association.
Yes, we do. We welcome Greg Goldberg, who is the attorney for BTA, and I think he's going to enjoy the 100th anniversary celebration. So how are you doing, Greg?
I'm doing great, Frank. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show. And it's really a career milestone for me to be here with you today. And I just couldn't possibly be more grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. That's extremely kind of you, Greg. And you are more than welcome anytime. If there's something you got to say or want to say, and to our audience, all you have to do is reach out to Mark or myself. We'll get you on. And
Thank you so much. You
can address whatever it is, because you have, historically, you have an extremely important position. I mean, the BTA and before it NOMDA had some difficult things to handle.
It's a funny thing coming into the industry because, I remember going to events for NOMDA when I was a little boy. Dad would take us down to wherever the conventions were at times, and I remember seeing the Beach Boys. I remember going all over the country and meeting dealers even when I was a young kid.
So what is it you're facing that you've come into the business?
Well, it's interesting, also not to make it too much about Bob, but I know that it was a very important legacy item for him to make sure that he left BTA in good hands when he decided to retire from his role as general counsel. And I know that there were a few others before me who he kicked the tires on to see if they could take on the role. But his concern about the previous attempts was that they didn't necessarily have the all-in dedication that he gave over the 47 years that he was general counsel. And so in handing or inviting me into this role, one of the commitments that I needed to make to him was that this wasn't meant to be a transactional relationship. This wasn't meant to be a superficial relationship. This was meant to be a wholehearted commitment to the dealer community and the members who make BTA what it is. Since taking on the role, it's really been an interesting time and an interesting transition, because I don't need to tell you, but I think it would be fair to say that we're in a paradigm right now where a lot of the independent and smaller dealers are being acquired by the bigger dealers, and we're starting to see that play out in a couple different ways. So my inbox is full of requests for legal advice and counsel through the BTA hotline, and it's interesting to see how those requests sort of fall into certain categories. One area that I'm sure, and Mark and I have talked about this, and CJ and I have talked about this, that comes up time and again is artificial intelligence. There's no question that all of our dealers are using AI to a certain degree, but the questions that come to me are the ones where AI is posing problems and people aren't really ready to troubleshoot those yet. Let me give you just two quick examples. One of them I recently wrote about in the magazine and also was featured in your publication as part of a Q&A, and that has to do with salespeople using AI-generated content to try and generate leads and to gain business. What I've come to find out from a few is that there's a problem when the AI generation language that comes out of the large language models could be defamatory. In other words, when a salesperson is spreading false information about another sales organization to try and gain customers, it's no excuse to that defamatory language to say that AI wrote it. It's just as though the person wrote it. Another area that I'm seeing a lot of activity in is when salespeople are uploading confidential information into the large language models. So it makes perfect sense that salespeople want to optimize their sales techniques and their reach and to use AI tools in order to help with that effort. The problem is, if you're going to put confidential information like customer list, pricing, things like that into the large language models, you might run into a problem because some of that information might be subject to non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements, things like that. So one of the major areas I'm working with dealers on right now is trying to help them navigate the changing landscape of artificial intelligence and to help them see around the corners to know what the risks are. Because my background, and I've been a litigator for over 20 years, is to help companies manage risk. And whether those companies are big or small, it's always my job to look out front and try and be the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, to help them see what's coming. Another area that's interesting, and this is developing far more recently too, is advocating for smaller dealers. We've had some different OEMs have made moves recently that have tended to prioritize some of the larger scale dealers, and at some instances, it's been at the expense of smaller dealers. So as you mentioned at the top of the show, Frank, BTA is about to undergo a major anniversary, 100 years advocating for, representing, and helping dealers throughout the country. Obviously, I haven't been on the scene for 100 years. Nobody has, but I've certainly been around long enough to see what some of the changes are and to help chart the vision for the future of the organization the next 100 years. And to me, what's most important is to make sure that the smaller dealers, the independents, have a voice in the future. And the best way to do that is to join our voices in a chorus as BTA and to help be an advocate for those smaller dealers. And I want to be really clear. I have a lot of respect for the larger dealers too, and I'm happy to work with them, and I often do. So this is not a preferential thing, but the important thing that I'm trying to highlight is that there needs to be enough room in the tent for everybody. So as we look ahead to the next 100 years, the most important thing to me is making sure that everybody has a seat at that table.
So really, AI poses so many problems for people simply because they don't understand the technology and they don't understand, that it's a tool that can be used. It has to be managed.
From my standpoint, AI is certainly a fertile ground for risk to business owners. So the way I like to think about it is sort of in two different buckets. The first bucket is more of a guiding principle. And one item that I've created that I've distributed to a number of dealers, and this is all across the country, by the way, is something I like to call an AI statement of principles. And so it's not a binding policy in the way that an employment contract would be, but what it does do is to share a shared vision for an organization of the underlying philosophy of how AI should be used within that business. And it's just like what you're saying, Frank. The goal is to use AI as a tool, but not as a substitute for thinking or writing necessarily. It's just meant to augment those skills. And then on the more granular level, and this is a bit challenging because as you may know, unlike the European Union, which has passed a comprehensive AI law, the United States does not have a federal law or regulation governing AI in a comprehensive way across the country. So where that leaves us is having 50 different states with, in many cases, 50 different rules for AI. And not all the states are as advanced as one another. So we can look to states like California, where I live and where I practice law, or Texas or Colorado, as some of the states on the leading edge of AI regulation. But we don't really know with any certainty at all if there's going to be a federal regulation. So when it comes to the second bucket for considering how to use and implement AI within a business, what most businesses are ultimately going to need is a comprehensive AI policy so that it's understood what the rules of the road are for employees who want to use AI to augment and to help their productivity. The interesting thing about the AI policies is that you can't write one that governs the entire country because the rules are different. So I suppose you could take one for a state like California where the rules are arguably the most restrictive and implement that elsewhere, but it wouldn't necessarily be the right tool for the job. So all to say, I think that, the way businesses should be thinking about AI is to have some kind of an underlying principle that can be shared with employees so that everybody understands what the purpose of using AI within the business is. And then on the more technical level, I think it's also important to integrate an AI policy so that when people run afoul of the rules, there's a clear reference point that employers can go back to and say, we have rules about this, and you need to observe those.
What you just shared with me is amazing and extremely interesting. I hope Brent gives you enough room for exposure, and you are contributing, I know, to the publication. And I hope you have the opportunity to address dealers at these various meetings about this, because I think in my opinion, it's getting serious.
I agree. And look, I talk to dealers every single day from all around the country, and I share a message very similar to the one that I just shared with you. And, it's a dynamic landscape. Things are shifting, and, we're seeing all sorts of proposed legislation all over the country in the various states. But, proposed legislation doesn't mean much unless it gets enacted. So that's where I try and sit, is right on the leading edge, trying to figure out what states are leading the way. Because, there's an old saying that the states are the laboratories for democracy in our country. And oftentimes it's the state laws that get tweaked and then enacted as federal laws in some way, shape, or form. So to me, it's a very useful exercise to look at what the states are doing in an effort to help anticipate where the country might go if we're able to get our act together in Congress and get a federal law on the books.
I think that, the thing that I've always thought about from the very beginning, AI could be a real good tool for dealers if it's used properly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can see so many different ways to, using AI within a dealership. It's incredible. All time saving, all people saving, and expense saving too, legitimately, and without damaging any of the business. When I say the people in the business, but really a tool that'll just make them more efficient and better able to do the job.
I agree. Look, I think that the dealerships that find the best ways to use AI tools to maximize efficiency without costing folks their jobs, which I know is a real concern, are going to be the dealers that are the most successful in the end. Again, AI isn't really meant as an efficient replacement. I mean, I'm sure you may have heard, just about every week I'm seeing a new story in some legal publication about some lawyer getting exposed for, AI hallucinations ending up in court documents.
Lawyer.
Right? Cases that don't really exist being cited, or cases being cited for propositions that don't appear anywhere in the opinions. What that tells me is that two things. Number one, the AI tools are good, but they're not good enough. And number two, you can't use a computer to replace the judgment, of a well-educated, human being who has knowledge and experience that can be applied, to the law. Because the idea is, if, you're using a laptop or a mobile phone or some other technology device as a crutch to take the place of critical thinking and analysis, then you're actually doing yourself a disservice, whether you're trained to be a lawyer or an accountant or running a sales organization or whatever the case may be. Again, AI needs to be a tool, not a replacement.
What you're saying is right on, and I really believe that if you ever need more exposure to that, to the audience, please let us know. You say, I got something here that I think would be relevant in terms of this discussion. I'm sure Mark would be delighted to hear that and get you a spot on one of the issues.
Well, it's so generous of you to offer that, Frank, and I'd be delighted to contribute to your legendary namesake report. It really, truly, like I said, is just an honor and a career milestone for me to be here today with you.
Well, that's extremely kind, and just what you've just shared with us is very significant, and I am truly pleased that our audience is seeing something very, very special and very, very relevant and very, very important. So,
well, it's my commitment to dealers, whether they're BTA members or not, but especially to BTA dealers. My email address is listed on BTA's website. So is my personal cell phone, by the way.
Good.
And, I encourage people to reach out to me anytime with questions. I do have a busy litigation practice here in California, but I always make time when I can for dealer questions and concerns.
Well, that's all good to hear, and I want to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us and sharing with us something that really is very, very important, and I'm sure we'll hear it from our audience as well. So thanks again.
My pleasure, Frank. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you as well.
And we'll do it again sometime.
Look forward to it.
Take care. Thank you.
You got it.